Andy Johnson, Minnesota State University. This is a short little mini lecture looking at the importance of knowledge, having a body of knowledge, why it's so important just to have stuff in your head. From the point of view of cognitive psychology, learning is acquiring knowledge, reorganizing your cognitive structures, which a good metaphor is the file cabinet. Putting new stuff in the files, moving the files around, maybe expanding the files, maybe throwing out files, maybe creating brand new ones. New knowledge, according to this cognitive psychology perspective, is not replicated. It's constructed. When you hear information, when you're hearing my words come out of your mouth right now, the ideas are not being transmitted from my head to yours. You're taking the information, you're mixing it with the stuff that's already in your head, and you are understanding, you're creating meaning. That's why it's important to have a body of knowledge. It's much easier to learn about stuff that I already know. When I read ed psych books, I can learn new stuff pretty quickly because I have a body of knowledge. I know exactly where that stuff goes. So, and just like your knowledge base is all a little different, how you're interpreting what I'm saying right now or what you're seeing on the screen is all going to be a little bit different based on what's in your head. Learning is an active process. You can't be learned or learned at. You have to do something, even if that something is paying attention or comparing something to another thing. Your mind, your thinking has to be actively engaged in order to learn. There are three types of knowledge. Now, information is just basic information. Knowledge is when you put it in the storage locker in your head and you know exactly where it goes. So, the three kinds of knowledge: declarative knowledge, I do declare, knowing what? Expository, knowing about things. Procedural knowledge, a skill, knowing how to do something. And conditional knowledge, knowing how and when to use declarative and procedural knowledge. Now, knowledge is different from memory. Memory is simply a holding tank, all right? Rote learning versus meaningful learning. Of course, rote learning is just stuff you put in the old storage locker and it's not connected to anything. To be meaningful, to make sense, it has to be connected or interconnected with what students already know. That knowledge in the head is very important. Knowledge is information that has been processed, organized, and encoded. Encoded means you put it in the right place. You understand how it relates to one thing or another. It's connected to something you know. And I'm going to use the storage locker. You rent a storage locker, you put stuff in there. You could just throw a bunch of stuff in there with no connection. That would be inert knowledge. That would not be meaningful. To encode it, you would organize it, you'd put it in boxes, and you'd store things, maybe the sports things here and the clothing stuff there. That's organized, that's encoded, it's connected to something. Knowledge, as I said, is essential for learning. The more you know, the more you can know. A body of knowledge is related to reading comprehension and fluency. It enables you to reason more powerfully and lessens the demands of problem solving. Problem solving, you're using working memory, all right? You got a lot of stuff. You don't have to hold as much stuff in working memory. You can focus on the big ideas, on interpreting new situations. To interpret new situations. When I go into a classroom, I have a body of knowledge and experience. I can interpret stuff pretty quickly. I'm 63 years old. I can interpret social situations much better than I could when I was 18. Brain is probably not functioning as well, but I have a lifetime of crystallized knowledge. It helps you be a good teacher. You're able to assess your students. You have a background of knowledge on learning and experience. It helps you assess what's going on in the classroom. Essential. Knowledge enhances perceptions. It enables you to see things. My 63-year-old eyes are not very good, not as good as when I was 18, but I see a lot more deer because of the knowledge of deer, deer sounds, deer movements, all that stuff. That's one example. It enhances understanding of situations. We kind of went through that. And knowledge is used to direct the search for new solid knowledge. Knowing about EdPsych, I know what I need to learn. It helps me organize and store that information. So I know what to look for. When I read a subject that's brand new to me, when I first started reading about how the brain works and neuroscience, that was brand new to me, and I had to spend a lot of time learning the basics. Once I've got the basics, now I know what to look for, and it's easier for me to learn about how the brain works in neuroscience. Now, the difference between a novice and an expert is the organized body of knowledge. Experts have acquired much of it related to their area of expertise. It's deep knowledge, deep understanding. So the experts know exactly what to attend to, what's important here in this situation, an expert golfer, an expert chess player, an expert teacher, all right? So very little attention is necessary for the acquisition of new knowledge. They're able to concentrate on higher level thinking because of that body of knowledge. Experts use knowledge to recognize patterns. Oh, yes, I see that pattern. It's related to this other thing in my head. And they use it for chunking and enhancing encoding. Chunking is when you take a bunch of random stuff and you put it into meaningful groups. So instead of seeing 14 things, maybe I'm seeing 3 things or 4 things. I'm able to see those patterns and know where they fit. A novice has a shallow and disjointed body of knowledge base. Now, pre-service teachers, you're learning some stuff here, but that knowledge base is generally shallow and disjointed, all right, as it well should be. Once you've been teaching for 4 to 40 years, that knowledge base becomes pretty deep, and it's a lot easier for you to understand what you're seeing and to learn new stuff. So some teaching tips. Plan and organize your lessons so students can see the structure of what is to be learned. And sometimes I even use graphic organizers. Boys and girls, we're going to learn about this today so they can see the structure. Seeing the structure and how it relates to other things enables them to encode it easily. When someone just says random and higgledy-piggledy stuff, it's pretty hard to learn. One of the reasons why I'm so attentive to using numbers and headings and subheadings, you can see the structure of what I'm talking about. That's what a good teacher does. Now, the amount. Sometimes people think, oh, I'm just going to give you more information and more learning will occur. Sometimes when you try to cover stuff, you cover up. Sometimes less knowledge actually enhances learning. So as a teacher, you have to be aware of what you're saying and what you're not saying. What you don't say is often just as important as what you do. So be aware of how much you are giving students. And by the way, students can handle stuff depending on the age. They can handle 5 to maybe 10 minutes of input, very young, 2 minutes. Give them some input, some knowledge, some information, but then they need some processing time just to kind of let all the parts of the brain connect to that. So you may say something like, well, turn to your neighbor and share an idea, or raise your hand if you think you have one idea that you like. Something could be anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes just to enable them to process, to pause and process. You want to try to make personal connections to the greatest degree possible to connect to students' lives. So that's the task of the creative, intelligent teacher. When you're teaching stuff that you have to, because it's in the curriculum, they make you. The creative teacher is able to make these connections to students' lives to help them understand. It's easier to understand stuff we experience and see every day. It's hard to understand stuff that's just totally new. And the last one, activate relevant schemata. Schemata is knowledge. It's a knowledge folder in your head. So if I'm teaching about frogs, to activate relevant schemata, I'd say, boys and girls, let's see what we remember about frogs or what we know about frogs. And I'd list maybe 4 or 5 things about frogs that they already know. Get it up on the board. That's activating relevant schemata. All right, just some stuff on the importance of knowledge.